What is the scariest or most disturbing crime that remains unsolved today? There used to be a site, but it has been since taken down and turned into a book, in which this man is convinced his stepfather was the killer. They always moved around California a lot, he owned every car that had been said to be seen the murder sites, and their handwriting were nearly identical. He finally called him on his deathbed and asked if it was him, and he said something very ominous. It's been a while since I've read it, but something along the lines of "You're a smart kid." There's an image from that town meeting that possibly shows him, but I don't know how to link it, cause I'm a moron. A man there looks similar to the sketch, appears to be on his own, and he's wearing a ski jacket I believe, and he also wore a ski mask. There's theories that he was a reporter or part of the police force so he could hide in plain sight. A lot of break-ins around the neighborhoods as he picked potential victims. He would often call them and hang up to see when people were home, and on some occasions he apparently hid bindings around the house or in bags outside in the bushes. He spent a lot of time prowling around those areas during the year phase of his crimes, to the point that the police were just starting to catch on and try to lay traps in areas with increased prowler activity before he vanished and headed south. He was also known to break into homes, search them, unload any firearms he found, and then leave. On at least one occasion, he dared the male to go for his gun, knowing it was not loaded. There's also reason to believe he was tapping phone lines at times, according to Shelby. My mom hawk-eyed me all through high school because of what happened to them. They were right around my age and from a slightly smaller school than I attended, not far away at all. I remember all the semis coming through my town that had their pictures pasted on them with a number to call with information after they disappeared. It was difficult to understand how that could happen to someone like me living out in Podunk, okay, especially as a teenage girl. Back when I was at Ohio State, a medical student named Brian Schaefer went missing. To this day, he has never been found. The really crazy part is that he was last seen going into Ugly Tuna, a popular bar in a crowded part of the campus area that is filled with surveillance cameras. There is video of him entering the bar, but never exiting. Part of me wonders if he is somehow still hidden in the bar, with nobody having found him. Basically, a girl goes missing during a cruise with her family in 1998. A year later, a guy reported being approached by her at a brothel. She told him her name is Amy Bradley and asked him to help her. Before he could do anything, she was escorted upstairs. That guy ended up reporting this to the police several months later. By the time he reported it, the brothel had been burned down. Human sex trafficking is genuinely terrifying. The Chicago Tylenol murders were a series of poisoning deaths resulting from drug tampering in the Chicago metropolitan area in 1982. The victims had all taken Tylenol branded acetaminophen capsules that had been laced with potassium cyanide. One James William Lewis was convicted of extortion for sending a letter taking credit for the deaths and demanding $1 million to stop them, and he was also the primary suspect in the killings despite living in New York City at the time. The incidents led to reforms in the packaging of over-the-counter substances and to federal anti-tampering laws. The 1993 murders of three 8-year-old boys in Memphis. A lot of you are probably familiar with the story, e.g. hog-tied, genitals mutilated with a knife, and buried in a riverbed. The West Memphis Three were wrongly convicted and imprisoned for over 18 years before DNA testing provided reasonable doubt. One of the victims' stepfather has been widely believed to be the actual murderer, with supporting evidence, but was never convicted. Every time I think about what happened to the boys, I cringe and shiver, but I am possibly more disgusted because those three innocent teenagers spent so long in prison when the dipshit dad roamed free and tried to sue the Dixie Chicks. Hilarious story. Makes me fear the judicial system more than murderers. Not the scariest for everyone as a whole, but disturbing for my family. My husband's mother was murdered when he was 15. She had just made manager at a convenience store after being a housewife her whole adult life. On her very first day a man came and robbed her and told her to lay on the floor. He then leaned over shooting her twice in the arm, then once in the head. The story has been on AMW and Unsolved Mysteries, but the man was never caught. You can see the surveillance footage here. A while back in the mid-90s there was an ongoing spree of murders in the Maryland area and DC area. The murders were done by an African-American male man mid-30s. What he would do, before he would attack his victims, is he would study their every movements so he would know the right time to attack. Luckily his last victim actually made it out alive because she screamed the top of her lungs and her next-door neighbor heard her and he ran to help her out. The story pretty much ended from there because he hasn't been back since and nobody has heard of him. In fact he is on America's Most Wanted Top 10 list. In Argentina, Alberto Nisman was a federal prosecutor. He was in charge of an exhaustive investigation concerning the AMIA terrorist hit. AMIA is the name of the Jewish community organization in Argentina. Their building was bombed in 1994. Nisman appeared on TV several times claiming that the actual president of Argentina, Cristina Kirchner, was somehow involved in this hit and that she helped cover the perpetrators. 1 or 2 days before the first day of court, he appeared dead in his house with a fucking bullet in his head. The tapes of the building are not clear or deleted. Information is confusing. We don't know if it was a suicide because he realized his case was not good or if it was a hit because his case was too good. It's not even the worst case we have here. I'm sorry it's late, so it probably won't get upvoted, but I think it's really fucking scary. And he's certain if this is exactly a crime, but Benjamin Kyle's case is pretty insane. He was found naked and unconscious in a dumpster behind a Burger King in 2004, having absolutely no idea how he got there and having no idea who he is. He never regained memory of anything in his life prior to 2004 and still does not know his identity. Despite DNA tests and extensive searches, no one has ever come forth to tell him who he is, and there are no past records of his existence. Casalra was a journalist and freelance writer who was investigating an organization he called the Octopus. This organization theoretically had the power to put anyone they pleased into political power and might have been responsible for a number of different scandals. After Danny started investigating, he started receiving phone calls that harassed him and threatened him. He went so far as to tell his brother that if he died, it was not an accident. Later his housekeeper received a number of the same harassing phone calls. A few days later, he was found dead in his bathtub, covered in his own blood with cuts all over him, but nothing was found nearby to have given the cuts. A suicide note was found on his desk nearby, and because there were no signs of a struggle, Danny's death was ruled as suicide. His family, however, said that he absolutely hated his own blood to the point where he would vomit if he saw it and would definitely not kill himself this way. There was one where I live, don't know if it made national news if I remember right. It happened in 78 or 79, a family of 5 up and disappeared. They had one witness that said they saw them get into the car they had and the dad looked scared, then left. About a month later the car was found abandoned. The cops went to the house and found dinner on the table and the TV still on. 2 years ago they found the bodies in a shallow grave in the desert, all shot in the head 2 times. Whoever did it still is out there. Some think it was a hit, others think it was a carjacking gone bad. No one knows why they left in the first place. There is one story local to me that is a bit weird. Lupita Cantu disappeared in 1990. Police never really investigated her disappearance, choosing to assume she abandoned her family. Her body was found nearly 2 weeks later in Frio County, evidently the victim of murder. The body was sent here to the medical examiner's office, but they never connected the body to the missing woman. It gets worse, weirder. It took 21 years before a DNA analysis was performed to identify Cantu's body. Obviously, her family was unhappy about this whole thing, both because no one seemed to care that she disappeared, no one seemed to care that the Jane Doe they found was murdered, and they had to wait 2 decades to even sort of know what happened to her. But once her body was ID'd, they wanted her exhumed so they could bury her properly. Only problem. Her body wasn't in the grave the government said it was in. A man was buried there instead. So her family still doesn't have her remains. Or, at this point, any clue where they are. A disturbing crime that still think about every once in a while is the disappearance of my aunt. Disturbing because I was so close to it. Marjorie Maldonado, Fairbanks, Alaska. In 1993 my aunt left the house to go to the store and get some milk. She never came home. Eventually she was reported as a missing person and they found her van parked behind a bar. That's basically it. They never found any trace of her things in the car and it was before the day and age of cell phones. It's not really something we talk about anymore. We all went from wondering for years to just accepting she's dead.